The First World War. The Central Powers versus the Triple Entente. Germany versus Britain. Yet, one of the most important combatants in the war, the Russian Empire, is often forgot about. Russia went through intense turmoil and hardship during this time. It created conditions perfect for a communist revolution, the first of its kind, and the birth of an ideology that would influence global politics for the next century. But what exactly was Russia like during these times?
After initial military successes, the Russian army faced defeat after defeat, such as in Tannenberg in August 1914 and Masurian Lakes in September 1914. After just 1 year of war, Russian casualties approached a staggering 4 million killed, wounded, captured or missing. The enthusiasm and high morale of August 1914 had, by 1916, been replaced with pessimism and defeatism. The bulk of soldiers were peasants in uniform. They began deserting in big numbers. The Russian army was by far the largest army of all the countries who fought in the war, but it had a lack of equipment. This was because of a lack of coordination between the different governmental departments responsible for ensuring supplies. Rifles were in short supply, and by 1915 the artillery was limited to 2 or 3 shells per day.
The war had many effects on Russia's economy. It absolutely crippled it. Spending had increased from 4 million to 30 million, and this had absolutely ruined Russia's ability to have money in its banks. Because of this, it was forced to abandon the gold standard in order to print more money, but this inevitably led to inflation. Because of this, Russia just simply couldn't produce enough food. Men had been conscripted off the fields and into the army. Horses had been commandeered, fertilizer used for the war effort. They simply didn't have the means to produce enough food. But food still existed. It couldn't make its way to the cities. 575 railways stations were unable to handle freight, and because of this, Petrograd was only receiving 1/4 of its rations, and Moscow only 1/5. Aid that had arrived in Archangelsk sank into the floor because it could not be distributed through Russia's poor railway network. The war affected everyone in Russia, no matter of your social group or class. The peasants were made up the bulk of the rank and file soldiers. They suffered from the hardships of war and became much more radical, joining the Mensheviks and the Bolsheviks. For peasants left at home, farming was stuck with them. They had to farm even though they were women, they were children, and they were elderly. They lacked the equipment such as horses and chemicals. Food shortages became commonplace, and peasants, due to the effect of inflation, were encouraged to hoard their food. The urban working classes were also badly affected. They faced severe food shortages too. This was made worse by Russia's scorched earth policy, where large areas of farmland were set alight to prevent food resources falling into the hands of the Germans. The prices of meat rose by 300% and flour by 200%. Despite this, wages had risen by 100%, but prices had gone up in general by 300%. This resulted in strikes and protests, and a danger of falling living standards riled up the population. War industry committees had been set up, but were eventually used as a platform where the workers could express their frustrations. National minorities were also affected by the hardships. The government had found it hard to control the remoter parts of the Russian Empire, and national minorities took this as an opportunity to fight for independence.
There were also many political problems in Russia. A mistake by the Tsar was actually getting Russia involved in the war initially, which it was not military or economically prepared for. Another problem was that after an initial wave of nationalism, the Duma was recalled after voting for its suspension after 1 year of war, and this gave a platform for the Tsar to be criticised for his actions. Another problem for the Tsar was that he did not listen to bodies closer to him that were in charge of helping him with the war effort. These included Zemgor and war industry committees that he ignored. Another mistake by the Tsar was not listening to the Duma, who wanted to set up a government of national confidence. This was a mistake as it lost him the support of the politically progressive parties like the Cadets. This also led to the setup of the Progressive Bloc, which was made by 236 deputies out of the 422 in the Duma who were denied a voice in political matters in Russia. This was a problem, as the Progressive Bloc did not initially want revolution, they only wanted reforms, but the Tsar ignored them, and this was a mistake, as he brushed aside the hand that was offered to him. So when the Tsar went to the front line, he left the Tsarina in charge. This was a massive mistake, as she was politically inexperienced. She also was seen to be pro-German, and she appointed Boris Sturmer as Prime Minister, which was seen as a bad move, and it was suspicious towards the Russians as he was also pro-German. Another issue with the Tsarina was that she was also under the influence of the holy monk Rasputin. Rasputin came from a peasant background and had a reputation for drunkenness, drug abuse, and womanizing. His debauched lifestyle appalled the nobility. This lost faith and undermined the royal family, as there were also suspicions of the Tsarina and Rasputin having an affair. There was also other problems under the Tsarina, as there were frequent ministerial changes. There were 36 in total within 2 years, and that included 4 different prime ministers. This created political instability in Russia and led to lots of anger towards the royal family.
All of these mistakes would eventually catch up to the Tsar. In February 1917, a particular wave of unrest swept the country after a harsh winter. Food and fuel were in short supply, and people were struggling, living in poverty and squalor. As well as this, general strikes were becoming more and more prevalent. On February 23rd, International Women's Day, women took to the streets of Petrograd to protest the Tsar. When they did this, it was originally a good-humoured protest, but it was not good-humoured for long. Men from the Putilov engineering works would eventually join the strike a day later, bolstering its numbers. The Tsar, finally finding out about the extent of the general strike, would call in the troops, ordering them to fire on the protesters. Some did, but this was a deeply unpopular move. Some troops even mutinied to their side. The Tsar ordered the Duma to disband on February 27th. However, they met on in secret. On March 2nd, after hearing from his high command he no longer had the support of the army, the Tsar abdicated for him and his son Alexei.